Hi guys, thanks for clicking onto our video. We want to share with you some practical tips that you can use if you're struggling at home at the moment and you've got no one to speak to and you're facing some challenges in life, or if you're struggling with some emotional pain and you can't afford to have some therapy. So we thought we'd share some practical tips, and I asked Glenn to be part of the video today because he's had a really challenging time as a teenager and he was able to really bring himself out of those dark days, and he did that with using some self-help tools. So I thought it would be really great for him to share his story so that if anyone else out there is suffering, you can know that, you know, if you do share how you're feeling, you can actually really bring yourself out of some challenging times.
Yeah, this is pretty much a follow-on from the video we did about not being weak to ask for help. And I just thought I'd share some tools and tips of how I got through some of my darkest moments in life. And if there's anyone out there that may watch this that are in a position at the moment where they feel that there's no light at the end of the tunnel and they just can't possibly see how they can get out of their current position. So I just want to give you a brief rundown of my story and my teenage years and how I got to sort of where I am. So basically my teenage years, without going into great detail, it was pretty full on for me. My father was in and out of prison, and my male guidance was really not there, so it made me look at books. So I just used to find as many books as I could and I just read and read. So what I used to do as a tip, and I never told anyone about it at the time, I would just write for hours on end. So anytime I was overwhelmed or really feeling depressed, I would just write, and I would just continue to do this throughout my entire teenage years. And I'm actually still holding on to a lot of the diaries that I used to write back then. So these are over 20 years old, so I've got stuff back here when I was really young. So leading on to later in my teenage years where things got increasingly worse, I ended up in a boys' home and so forth. And I even used to write inside the boys' home, and what I'd do is I'd write during the night, and then when we got released in the morning I'd rip it up and throw it up so none of the boys would find it. So I just found it as a really strong tool to use to really get what's going on in your head out in writing.
And so a kinesiology tip that we use is that we actually, when a client comes to see me, and especially when they have, you know, their first session and we're starting to touch on some very deep core issues that are affecting them, I get them to go home and I get them to use this exercise where they pick one topic or one emotion that they're struggling with at the moment, and I actually get them to write about it for 20 minutes and for 3 days in a row. So you pick one topic and you just continuously write about it for a solid 20 minutes. So, you know, whatever comes up, you just allow it to flow and you just write it down. And what happens by the end of the 3 days is that you feel like you've had a massive cleanse, because it's like a massive release, because you're really getting out the emotions that are very deep within your subconscious, and you start to put that down on paper. And sometimes when you're writing, you actually don't remember. You go, oh my God, I can't believe, and I forgot that happened. And so you really start to bring up a lot of stuff that has been buried, you know, down. And sometimes when you're really struggling, you know, sometimes you can use things to try and suppress those feelings. And some of the things that you could use to suppress the feelings are food, sex, drugs and alcohol, because a lot of people don't like to feel their emotions, so they use things to suppress it. So the idea of this activity is to write it out, get what you're feeling out of your head onto the paper, and at the end of that 3 days you can do two things. You can either keep the journal and then go back over it and read over it, or you could, you know, rip all the paper out, screw it up and burn it. And that's kind of what you did, wasn't it, when you were throwing things away?
Yeah, I pretty much use it as a way to get stuff out of my head. And as time went on, I realised that when you are at rock bottom, there's not really an option. It's either you end it all, or you realise that you're going to have to, you know, give it the biggest fight you've got and push through everything that's coming your way. And that's the situation I was in. Like I was at a position where there was nothing left, and I realised that it's either I'd call it a day and end it all, or I'm going to give it everything I've got and commit to it and go for it from there. And that's how I got further and further into therapy. And I did a lot of this stuff by myself. I had some good people around me, and that's always important. So if you can get good people around you, that makes so much of a difference. And just keep fighting, because I can tell you now, there was a lot of years in my life where there was no way known I could see any light at the end of the tunnel, and I couldn't then see any form of anything good happening for me. And just with continually seeing people and reading and reading and writing and writing, I was able to get to a point in my life where, you know, from where I was to where I am now, it's an incredible shift, because I never thought I would be in a position that I am in now with my own company, and especially with Natalie, and I've got like awesome kids. And so that's coming from a situation where I thought, you know, am I pulling the pin here, to having a life that is so beyond incredible to me? And yeah, it's definitely was worth the push all the way through.
And so if you really do feel alone and you are at that point where you feel as though you might take your life, you know, always make sure you go and seek help. And if you've got nobody to speak to, you know, there's so many things that you can do, like Lifeline, you could call Lifeline. And so if you're challenged at the moment and you can't afford therapy, and, you know, try this writing technique. Choose one topic and write about it for a solid 20 minutes for 3 days straight. Don't start it if you can't finish it, you know, because by the end of the 3 days is where you have that real release. But, you know, if you do it for one day, you might just bring some things to the surface, and then you might start feeling angry and anxious because you haven't completely released it. So only start this activity if you're willing to commit to that 3 days. So I hope this has helped you guys in some way. And if you need someone to talk to, and send us a message, and we'll be more than happy to help you with anything. And we can maybe, head you in the right direction for where you need to be. So thanks for watching.
Thanks.